Hi and welcome to the second part of the video where we continue to look at the new nodes in Silhouette 2023. In this part, we are going to be focusing on grain management, specifically on how to use the brand new nodes such as Denoiser ML, Grain, and Regrain. Before we dive into the nodes, let's take a quick look at where the grain actually comes from and what's the difference between film grain and digital sensor noise, if there is any. Let's start with the film grain, as this is how the course of the history unfolded. Back in the days, people could only shoot on film. Camera film is made up of a celluloid or plastic base covered with the layers of photosensitive emulsion. If you look at the film through a microscope, you'll see something that looks like this. These are silver halide crystals that are dissolved in the emulsion and are sensitive to light. And these tiny particles are what actually forms the image and are the cause of the grain texture that you see. The whole image is literally made up of grain. When light hits the film, it causes a chemical reaction in the emulsion, creating a latent image that is invisible to the naked eye. Then, when the film is developed with special chemicals, these silver halide crystals turn into black metallic silver. The result is a visible image that looks inverted from what you have seen with your eyes. Once you print those negatives or process them digitally, what you'll get is a negative of the negative, and that makes a positive. What matters to us is how the grain is distributed based over the tonal range. If you look at this image here, as you can see, our blacks aren't showing the film grain as much, but the mids and the brighter areas are. Remember, the light was originally captured inverted on the film strip. Silver halide crystals that did not receive any light did not turn into black silver and were simply washed away during the development process. Therefore, once we invert the image into normal colors, we'll end up having a pure black color in the areas that were underexposed, that will show no grain at all. Understanding of this is vital for any VFX artist. And what's about modern digital cameras? They don't have any silver halide crystals inside, so where does the noise come from? Digital noise is a signal interference caused by the nature of the electronics in our digital cameras. When light hits the sensor, it creates an electrical charge. These charges are amplified and converted into voltage. The resulting analog voltages are then taken and converted into digital values. And during that conversion process, you can have noise that is introduced. These are called readout noise and quantization noise. By cranking up the ISO on your camera, you amplifying the signal, but you also amplifying the noise. And unlike the film grain, digital noise is mostly visible in the shadows area. The other thing that causes noise in the image is the physics of the light itself. Imagine that each pixel on a sensor is a bucket that collects photons of light. If the photons traveled in a uniform order, we would get the same amount for each pixel. But in reality, photon flux is stochastic, like raindrops, and so the amount that we get will be different for each pixel. That is called photon shot noise, and it has nothing to do with the camera sensor. It is a fundamental limitation of light detection, and it is especially noticeable in low light conditions. The overall clarity of your image would depend on the signal-to-noise ratio. Some amount of noise will always be present, but the stronger your signal is, the clearer image you'll get. And why am I telling you all of this? Now it should be clear that adding a grain is not as simple as just throwing a random overlay over your footage. If you want to be a professional, you need to treat the grain in a more thoughtful way. And knowing this basic theory, you can fully appreciate how much of a value VoiceFX tools can bring into your workflow. Now let's see how to put this into practice. We will continue right where we left in the previous video. I strongly recommend you watching this video in 4K resolution to see all of that fine details. Otherwise, you won't be able to see that due to strong YouTube compression. In previous tutorial, we used stability node to generate some textures and compound that over the lady's face and the mirror. If you missed that part, click on the link that will pop out on your screen. But an eagle-eyed viewer might have noticed that a few things were left uncovered. And one of those things is camera shake. I will disconnect this shake node and let's create a new one from the start. So I hit tab and search for shake. You may find that there is a regular camera shake node that comes with a silhouette, and you can use that one, but I would go with a Sapphire shake because it has a bunch of presets that we can use as a base start. So I add it to my node tree and click on Load Presets. Here you will find the list of pre-created presets that has very descriptive names. Some of them are more mild and others are more shaky and crazy. I would go with the one that is called We Gonna Crash. Then I click Load. And now if I play it back, you can see that this is a bit too much. But this is only our base start. So to make it a little less crazy, I placed my playhead on a frame where I want my shake to have the maximum amount and decreased the amplitude and the frequency to a bit lower values. I also decreased the distance parameter as I don't want to zoom too much. Then I clicked on a stopwatch icon for the amplitude and the frequency to create a keyframe on this frame. After that, I went back a couple of frames and decreased the values even more. The keyframes were created automatically. Then I scrubbed forwards and repeated that. Added 2 more keyframes with the lower parameters after our main peak of shakiness is already happened. And what it gives us, we have a slightly nervous camera in the beginning, then it goes wild, and then back to normal. The shot is much more dynamic now than it was while being static. Cool, we're finally ready to talk about grain management. The proper workflow for the grain is to always do your paints and comp work on the denoised material and then add the noise back as the very last step. This workflow prevents artifacts from appearing during the process such as keying, and it's just easier to work this way. Let's go up to the very beginning of our project and see what a complete proper workflow should look like. In the very beginning of our script, I would add a denoiser ML node. This is a new tool added in Silhouette 2023 release. It has been trained on a large dataset of footages and gives a great result without the need to tweak a bunch of parameters. But you need to know which model you should use for different kind of shots. The default one is supposed to remove general sensor noise, so it will work better for the most of the shot you usually work with. The other one is a better option to choose if your footage was shot in a low light or if it has visible compression artifacts. We would look at related example a bit later. Even though our shot is in a low key, it does not have too much of a noise. So the default model would work just fine. Let's check before and after. And we successfully got rid of the noise. Now let's go down through the script. I was using some pre-comps, but now that I have denoiser added, I would deattach the pre-comp and try to render everything in one go. And now I go to the very bottom of my node tree, and after camera shake, I need to add grain back in. Well, I do not want to use the original grain that was here in the shot, because we barely had any in the first place. Instead, I want to use grain as an artistic tool to add more structure and to enhance the overall look and atmosphere. So the best option for that would be to use Ultra Grain. Ultra Grain is a filter that was available in Sapphire package and now finally made Silhouette, making it a perfect grain restoration tool for composite work. Inside Preset Browser, you will find a big variety of options. Some of these presets emulate common film stocks, while others mimic the noise pattern of modern cameras. I recommend you zoom in a bit, use Compare Split mode, and just go through the library. I want to find a preset with pretty noticeable grain pattern, but not go too crazy. For this shot, I would go with the movie Dead Evil preset. This one gives me a perfect balance. If the grain is just a bit too strong for you and you would want to reduce it, nothing stops you from going to the settings and reducing the grain amp just for a bit. And now let's compare how the shot looks like with the grain and without. For this shot, grain is a great finishing tool that really added that icing on the cake that was missing. The new Denoiser ML and Ultra Grain could be a shot-saving combo just by using two of them. Let me explain. Sometimes we need to work with the footages that are not looking as good as we would want that. Maybe you need to stick in your edit a footage from some old archive, or your main drive gone dead and you only left with the low resolution high compressed proxies. This clip is perfect for showing exactly that. Let me zoom in so you can really see all of that nasty compression blockiness. If you would stick in this shot in your main edit as it is right now, it won't be looking really good, especially if you have good quality clips placed before and right after. But with the help of Denoiser ML, we really can make it look better. So once I apply that, we don't really see much of a difference yet because default mode is supposed to reduce sensor noise, and we don't really have any sensor noise here because of that hard compression. But if I try to switch my model to compression plus noise, our image is already looking much more smoother. Keep in mind, while watching this on YouTube, the result may look different to what I'm actually seeing in the silhouette window. Pay attention to this area while I'm switching between before and after, and you really can see that most of that compression blockiness is immediately gone. You can render that straight after the denoiser, or optionally, add a subtle amount of grain. Neat and tidy pattern would look much better than that blockiness that we originally had. I would pick one of the monochrome presets because our original image is obviously black and white. And let's compare. This one is looking much more better. Alright, in both previous examples, we were using ultragrain just as a stylizing effect. But let's see how easy it is to match to a particular grain pattern in case we need to match that across the sequence of adjacent shots. So we have a clip with a girl on a sunset, and I also prepared a photo that was shot on a real film that we would use as a reference and we'll try to match to that. I really tried to find the footage that looks somewhere similar, so we would be comparing apples to apples. This clip has no grain at all, so I would reach for ultragrain straight away. This photo was taken on a Kodak Vision 250D film, and let's see if we can find something similar in our preset browser. This time, instead of going through library manually, I can use search and just type in Kodak, as this is the one that I'm looking for. And seems like we have exactly what I needed. Kodak 35 250D. So I would pick that one. And let's see how close it is. I will be focusing in this area because remember how we discussed how grain is distributed differently in shadows and midtones, and this area has both of that, so it will be easy to compare. So what I can see from now, the pattern looks really close, but we're not quite getting enough of the grain in the brighter areas. And if you want to match that perfectly, that is totally customizable. Head over to the ultragrain settings and you'll find 3 separate parameters for the amount of grain in your darks, mids and brights. I'll turn everything to 0 and try to start from scratch. First I'm gonna slowly crank up the brights, and you see how much pronounced grain pattern becomes. Let's check that over the different areas of the image. Looks pretty well close to me. Now let's tweak the other ranges. If I try to tweak darks, not much are gonna be changing because we do not really have darks areas in our clip. Only except of these dark sunglasses. So I would set my blacks somewhere around 0.5. Now let's tweak the mids. Again, I would be comparing to this shoulder area. So the grain in our mids should be pronounced, but not as much as in the highlights. I'm slowly cranking that up until I reach to the desired amount. Overall, both images are looking pretty close to each other now. Let's see how that looks in motion. Moving forward to the third and last new tool in Silhouette 2023 for managing the grain. We have such a clip, and our task for this one is to put some kind of insert on this wall. If I zoom in, you can see that here we have quite a bit of a digital noise in the shadows area. Let me adjust the viewer's gain and gamma so you really can see that. For the insert, I have prepared such an image. I used color correction nodes to match the color of the wall a bit more, and I used 2 of them because to the seconds I'm feeding a linear gradient as a matte to emulate the light that is coming from this window. So one part of my insert is now slightly brighter than other. Lastly, I added some amount of defocus. Looks not bad from the distance, but if I zoom in, you can see where the problem is. We have decent amount of noise in the wall, and there is none of that on our added text, so it's look a bit fake. This is why for compositing work, it's always better to start with the denoised plate as your starting point. So let's add a denoiser. I connect it to the very beginning of my script, and immediately the overall blend looks much better. But we cannot leave it just like this. We need to add our grain back both to the wall and to our insert. And if you need to preserve the original noise pattern that was already there in the source material, the regrain node comes into play. I create one at the bottom of the node tree, and now it's extremely important to respect the correct input order. First one should be connected to our original source. Second one goes to the denoised plate. And third input is for a final composite. Once you connect all of the three inputs, you'll see that the grain is already added back. But this is not the final result yet. We actually need to click on Analyze. By doing that, regrain won't only overlay the original grain back, but it will also adjust it according to the tonal range of your final comp. After analyzation is finished, I would disable the scattering for now, we'll get to that later, and let's see what it gives us. If I switch between before and after, you can see that the pattern stays exactly the same. To demonstrate what regrain do even better, I've actually made a snapshot before clicking on Analyze, and now we can use horizontal split mode to check how the noise looked before analyzation and after. You definitely can see that after analyzation, the noise pattern is much more visible over the darker areas where the letters are. And this is how it should be. That looks nice. Now, you might be wondering, but what if instead of composite, we would use math composite with any of the blending modes? Won't the noise be visible as it is then? Well, in some cases that would work, but I used a regular composite node here for a specific reason. Imagine that instead of a one-colored text, you would need to comp something like a poster, or anything else that has multiple colors. In that case, none of the blending modes would work because you need to add the insert on the top and not just blend. What I'm trying to tell, by following this regrain workflow, you can easily swap inserts and make changes to a comp, and do not worry about manual noise matching. Most of the work is done for you with just a few clicks. The very last thing that I want to show you is what is this pink matte input for. This is better to be shown on another clip. So what I have here is a pretty simple screen replacement setup, and the general principle stays the same. First I added a denoiser, then did a simple track and removed track and markers with the help of AutoPaint, and keyed out the green area to add an insert. Now it's time for regrain. I connect everything as needed and do the analyzation. We have our grain back now, but let's zoom in a little bit closer to the phone. Uh-oh, look what we have here. Looks like a tracking marker. But I painted them out, why do I still see them? Well, that's because the regrain is figuring out the noise pattern by comparing the source plate to the denoised one, and both of them still have the markers in it. So after we apply regrain, those tracking markers kinda appear as an artifact, and we have another problem to fix. The fourth, matte input, is needed exactly for fixing that. If I draw a simple shape and fit the alpha in, what regrain will do, it will leave the original grain everywhere where the alpha is black and scatter the randomized grain within the area where the alpha is white. Meaning we can fix the tracking marker artifacts that are bleeding in by applying the scattered grain only in the areas where we need that. I actually already have my alpha that we can use, so I would delete this shape. And now I can connect this matte input either to the output of the paint node or to the roto node that I was using to track the phone. Then the grain would be scattered over the whole screen. If I zoom in now, you can see that even though we connected our matte, nothing seems to be changed. To make that actually work, we need to enable a couple of things. First of all, in the regrain settings, we need to enable scattering, and the sample box has appeared. This box defines the area where you sample the noise from. You need to place it over an area that is even in lighting and has no details. If you would place it in the wrong area, like for example here, where the marker originally was, you will make things look even worse. So be careful where you place the sample box. The better place would be to leave it somewhere here. Now when I turn the scatter on and off, you can see that the artifacts from the markers are disappearing. But now it actually scatters the grain over the whole image. To limit it to the area of the matte that we fed in, we need to scroll down in the settings and under the matte menu, turn on the Enable checkbox and select the corresponding channel. I am using the Alpha Matte, so the default option is what I need. Now everything is set up as it should be. In all areas except the screen, the noise pattern stays exactly the same. And the scattered noise is only appearing within the area of our matte to hide unwanted leftovers from what was cleaned up. And that's it! We went through the whole process, starting with denoising the footage, then assembling our comp, and adding the noise back in the end, either with an artistic approach or in a more technical way. I hope you've had a great time and learned something new. My name is Elizabeth Postel. See you in the next videos. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and feel free to leave a comment or reach to our forums if you have any troubles. Subscribe to Boris Effects YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell to not miss any future videos.